Watch this.
With school starting in days for some people, we're asking about the science and psychology of wearing masks in the classroom, while others may not be. We couldn't get to them during the week, so today we're going to answer some of your 208 questions. Breaking a mirror, crossing paths with a black cat, walking under a ladder. Those superstitions are likely amplified today for those suffering from frigatriskaidekaphobia. And back in 1915, a few Emmett men found out what that word meant the hard way. For some of our kids, this is the last weekend of summer vacation. Boise School District starts class on Monday. But for a lot of others, there's still a few days and even a couple weeks left. And during that time, we're bound to hear more discussions and arguments about whether those kids, in an effort to curb the rising spread of the coronavirus, should be required to wear face coverings in the classroom, in the hallways, indoors. The Boise School District has already decided to follow the CDC and Central District health guidelines and make masks mandatory indoors. For the other districts, it remains optional. We wanted to take a look at this issue from two different angles: the scientific side and the psychological side of going with the optional option. First, let's lay out the facts and the scenario for the scientific side. The Delta variant is the dominant strain in Idaho at this point, a version far more contagious than the original COVID-19. And we're seeing numbers now we haven't seen since the tail end of the last surge. It's more contagious, scientists say, because of what they call the viral load, or the density of the viral particles in your body. That's the amount of virus that they're finding in the nose and throat of those infected. And with Delta, it's much higher, like by a lot. A study has shown the viral particles of Delta to be 1,260 times higher than the OG strain of COVID. And Delta has been pretty prevalent with kids, unlike the previous versions. With 12 and under unable to get the vaccine right now, that potential with that spread has become quite the problem. So we wanted to ask Dr. David Pate about this. Dr. Pate is the former CEO of St. Luke's Health System. He has experience with crisis care standards from his time in Texas, and he's a member of the governor's coronavirus working group. So we brought him a potential schoolroom scenario that is likely this fall in a school where masks are not required. A classroom filled with 20 to 30 kids, some wearing masks, many not. What can happen with a kid who isn't wearing one?
If a child's in that room and has Delta, the first thing is they may or may not know they're sick. So they may be asymptomatic, but they will have this very high level of virus. What happens is the virus gets in the air. It gets in the air from talking, breathing, coughing, sneezing, yelling, singing, whatever they're doing. That's how it gets in the air.
Dr. Pate says there are two ways the virus spreads. One being respiratory droplets. That's the saliva and secretions coming out of your mouth when you do the talking, coughing, and singing things. And those particles are usually large enough to see if you put a glass screen in front of your face while doing them.
If that respiratory droplet then lands on your face and you're not wearing the mask, it could be introduced into your nose or throat.
Or they could land on your desk. Then you touch them, then touch your face. The other form of transmission is airborne.
Airborne, we're talking about now much smaller amounts.
Dr. Pate says while droplets will drop to the ground, and because of gravity, usually within 6 feet, aerosols are lighter.
Aerosols travel on airstreams throughout the room. And so this is how people that are sitting across the room could actually get infected. The CDC believes respiratory droplets are still the primary way people get infected. But I will tell you, I think there's very little certainty of this. And certainly when we hear the cases where large numbers of people are being infected and weren't necessarily enclosed, that's probably aerosol. So wearing a mask is going to cover the nose and mouth. So at least those big particles that I talked about on the glass or mirror, they're going to get held up in this and not travel to you as much.
And, Dr. Pate says, a study released last year showed masks also helped slow aerosol transmission.
Doesn't eliminate it, but it decreases it significantly. Now, on the flip side, you wearing the mask in the room if I'm infected. If I'm not wearing a mask and I am projecting both droplets and aerosols in the room, at least this mask will provide some degree of a barrier to you breathing in these virus droplets that I'm putting out there. Won't be perfect, but it will decrease it.
We've had this a couple of times and people point this out. How could a mask like this, a disposable mask or a cloth mask that people use, be effective against something like an aerosol?
Yeah, I was surprised as well. But the studies came out last year and showed the first thing is having the mask is actually decreases the amount of aerosols you put into the room. The second thing is if you wear it properly, it won't decrease it 100%, but it decreases it significantly. And frankly, if the virus is going to be in the air that you're in, then your next big hope is at least decrease the amount of virus that you get exposed to, because perhaps you might get exposed to virus, but it'll be less than what we call the infectious dose, the amount of virus that it would take to infect you. And even if not, if you do get infected, we still have reason to believe the less virus you get infected with, the less severe your illness will be. So those are the benefits. It's not 100%, but it is going to give you a huge help. It's just like a bulletproof vest isn't 100% effective either. But if somebody's shooting at me, I sure would like to have one.
Okay, so that's the scientific side of some kids wearing masks and some not. And you heard Dr. Pate mention studies that have shown these things. Studies seem kind of general, we know, but like Sean asked a couple of days ago, or rather requested, please bring to all of our attention that scientific research showing masks help stop spreading COVID-19. Well, we did ask Dr. Pate about this, but even he admitted there isn't a specific website where all of these studies are being collected right now. They're kind of all over the place. He suggested starting with the CDC website, the National Institute of Health website. You could even look at a website called CIDRAP. But again, start with the CDC and the NIH and then search masks. We've also included some links in this story at KTVB.com. Okay, so what about the psychological side? The peer pressure, the anxiety, the desire to not want to be different. For that, we reached out to Dr. Scott Hoops, a Meridian psychiatrist who works with kids. He told us elementary school kids usually adopt the values and points of views of their parents, and wearing or not wearing a mask in class will be more of an emotional thing without a fully developed rational mind. With adolescents, that middle to high school age, it'll be some of the same thing. They tend to follow parents' values, but they can sometimes do their own thing. And unfortunately, as humans, we tend to divide quickly and easily into groups. Those who agree with us and those that don't. And those not like us, well, we tend to be a little bit less generous with them. Our kids have been the focus of these face-covering confrontations, but it's also put them smack in the middle of it.
But it seems to me the bottom line is it's going to create out-group, in-group. That's going to create conflict and tension. With elementary school kids especially, it's going to be very emotionally based. Adolescents, you're going to add some rationality to it. But let's be fair, we adults aren't being very rational about this either.
This conflict thing, in addition to all the other stuff that you have to deal with in middle school and whatever, that can't be good to add another whole layer of stuff.
Well, exactly. And so for the elementary school kids, it's defending my parents and my family, my people, right? And again, how can that not be emotional? And that division between kids is not going to be acted out in a happy way quite often.
How much of this conflict between, masks, no masks, vaccinated, not vaccinated, that their parents are dealing with are trickling down into the kids?
Well, very largely, that's the point. And it's just, it's bombarded in the media. How could you look at any media without being exposed to something like this? And then it's hard for parents not to be caught up with it with child-age children, because one of the most powerful impulses, inclinations we have as human beings is protecting our children. And then, of course, what are you protecting them against? Are you protecting them against the tyrants in government that want to dictate every action? Or are you protecting them against the reckless people who want you to get to a disease and drop dead? Well, those are fundamental kind of value things that we as adults are struggling with.
So none of this is really shaping up to be a solid, nurturing atmosphere for kids, I'm guessing.
No, not. And again, with kids, it's up to us as adults to lead them out, to show them a way. In all of human history so far, when there has been crises, people have found a way out, and often that way out has been constructive and positive. At this point, we're struggling with that, right? And there's a lot of forces that are polarizing us as a society that children have and adolescents that simply don't have the tools to deal with at all.
Well, I asked Dr. Hoops how he suggests that parents talk to their kids about situations like this when they go into the classroom and see that they're not wearing a mask, or the others are not wearing the mask, but they are, and all that kind of stuff. And he basically said it's kind of like that in-group and out-group. You have to find that common ground. You got to talk to each other, but you also have to be generous with each other. And there's no real easy answer to this other than trying not to put that pressure that you're feeling with this whole situation onto your kids. You've asked us a lot of questions over the last week. Today, we're finally going to get to answer a few of them, from COVID to taxes to the massive infrastructure bill. And we're always looking for more of your questions. The 208 text line is open pretty much all the time. Just make sure to include your name and the hashtag the 208 so we know you're sending it to us. The number's 208-321-5614. And if you send it now, we might be able to share it at the end of the show. We get a lot of questions sent into the 208 on a weekly basis through text messages, email, and on our social media pages. And sometimes we get a chance to catch up on answering a few of them, like today, and like this one from Diane, who asked, what's the update on the vaccines for 12 and under? And why was 12 the magical age to cut off vaccines when it comes to those eligible to get one? Well, it's a big topic with school starting and why we are seeing these calls for masks in the classrooms because those 12 and under can't get vaccinated right now. It's only approved, at least the Pfizer vaccine is only approved for emergency use in kids 12 and older. But both Moderna and Pfizer are working on vaccine studies for kids under 12. Pfizer is currently conducting two different studies, one with kids ages 5 to 11, the other with kids under the age of 5. The company, they previously said they plan to release preliminary results for 5 to 11-year-olds in September, with results for those as young as 6 months old by the end of the year. Moderna, meanwhile, is also conducting a study in kids 6 months to 11 years old, and that's going to take about 14 months to complete, but it is expected to have more participants. Also different, the FDA has asked both companies for 2 months of safety data for the current COVID vaccine before it was approved for emergency use. They're also asking for 6 months of follow-up safety data for those kids, and, well, they've been asked to increase the number of participants in those trials. In the meantime, the CDC recommending that those younger than 12 continue to wear masks when they can't keep their distance, as we all know. How about this one from Ron? Is it true that part of the payback of the $1.2, well, he says $3, but $1.2 trillion, Americans will pay a per mile fee or tax for driving? Well, the short answer is yes, but it's not a full-blown yes. It took us a little bit of time to find the answer on this one, though, Ron. It was a good one, tough question. We found it, though, because it was tough. It was buried deep in the 2,700-page document, which includes that $1.2 trillion bill. We found it, though, on page 508, section 13002, titled National Motor Vehicle Per Mile User Fee Pilot. Basically, it's a $10 million pilot program that would evaluate if a per mile user fee would be effective and practical for American drivers. Basically, drivers would pay the government per mile, every mile that they drive. The money generated would help to maintain the nation's infrastructure. But it would be a voluntary program, meaning we're not all just enrolled in this automatically, and those participating would pay that per mileage fee in the beginning. But then that money would eventually be refunded by the government. The program would start next year and run through 2026, which we would expect that money to come back. But wait a second. What about the gas tax that we pay at the pump? Isn't that the same thing? Sort of. Instead of per gallon, it would then just be per mile, so more of a usage fee. All right, next up, Liz asked, hey, Brian, will you find out about the tax rebate from Idaho? What is it? Well, that's a pretty good question. Good one, yes. And to be honest, this one kind of flew under the radar for a lot of people. It happened during this year's legislative session. Remember, it's the longest session in history with more headlines than we like to remember. Maybe why a lot of us missed it. Lawmakers passed House Bill 380, which created the Idaho Tax Rebate Fund. It's supposed to provide a tax relief rebate to permanent Idaho residents. We got a surplus. Remember that? Nearly $1 billion right now. And this bill meant that those who live in Idaho for at least 270 days a year in the gem state are going to get a little kickback. Governor Little signed that bill back in May, and those payments started going out last week. So here's how it's going to break down. The amount you get depends on what you listed on your 2019 return. It's either going to be 9% of your 2019 income or $50, whichever is greater. $50. So let's say it's $50. It's $50 per taxpayer and $50 per dependent. So if you're listed as single and you filed in both 2019 and 2020, you should get a $100 deposit into your account or maybe a full-blown check. You got 4 dependents, well, that's $50 a piece there as well. But in order to get that rebate, you had to have filed your 2019 and 2020 income taxes. If you haven't yet, there's not a problem. You still can. The deadline to do that and still get the rebate is December 21st of this year. Some of those checks have already started to go out, and they may have already hit your bank account, so double check. For a lot of people, today is believed to be unlucky. Well, 4 men from Emmett found that out for themselves back in 1915. The story has to do with fishing and, of course, a black cat crossing paths. Do you have any Friday the 13th superstitions? Maybe you're frigatriscadecaphobic. Yep, it's a word. Just text us your weird superstitions. 208-321-5614. And don't forget, we want your name and the hashtag the 208 attached to that too. All right, it is Friday, and normally we're all about celebrating Fridays. End of a long work week, probably. Start of the weekend for a lot of people. Today is a little bit different, though, because it's Friday the 13th. You've likely heard of triskaidekaphobia. That's the fear of the number 13. But have you heard about frigatriskaidekaphobia? Just add the frig on front. Yeah. That's the morbid or irrational fear of Friday the 13th. Frigatriskaidekaphobia. The Frigg is actually the name of the Norse goddess for whom Friday is named. She's also the goddess of marriage and motherhood, which is also frigga-frightening for a lot of people. Well, this fear of 13, or the unlucky aspect of it, goes back a long way. Some stories go far back as, well, the 1300s, appropriately, when the Knights of Templar were arrested on Friday the 13th by King Philip. There's also the Norse mythology version, which makes a lot of sense. It has to do with 12 gods having a dinner party at Valhalla, and Loki walks in, showed up, uninvited, as the 13th guest. And some things happened. Well, speaking of God and a 13th guest, some say Jesus' Last Supper was on Friday the 13th, and Judas is believed to have been the 13th guest at that dinner. But no matter what you believe, Friday the 13th continues to be a signal for the superstitious, well, to watch out. So it was superstitious for a fishing group from Emmett back in 1915, for sure. Check out this article from the Emmett Index back in 1915. The headline from that paper, Index editor lost or stolen. Friday the 13th and a black cat proves downfall of fishing party, it says. So here's the story in a nutshell. They kind of timed it out for you. Friday the 13th, August 13th. The place would be the Wood River country, or the Wood River Valley as we know it now. The girl, a black cat, lost the editor of the Emmett Index, an automobile, and 4 boys. The editor, that would be Ed Skinner, and 13 others, headed out to Haley to go fishing, as the story goes. They had a perfectly lovely time, the paper said, until within about 12 miles of Haley, when a black cat crossed the road in front of them, and it just went downhill from there. The car, being driven by Skinner, developed what they referred to as puncture-titussis. And over the next 3 miles, they had tires go flat 8 times. Fits, they called them. And then the bearings went out on one of the rear wheels, and they had to wait days to get parts sent in from Boise. So the rest of the party, well, they just left them there. Of course they would. Why not? To do what? Well, who knows? But they made it home safely. According to the article, Ed and the boys showed up nearly a week later, just in time to help get the paper mailed out that day. Recently, our Idaho Weather Watchers page on Facebook has been inundated with pictures of critters, everything from hummingbirds to praying mantises or manatees. Well, that's what you want to call it. So hold on to the last few weeks of the season. Let's just take a minute to enjoy just some of the critters who thrive in these dog days of summer. All right, final moments of the show on this Friday the 13th. Let's get to your comments, like this one from Cheryl. I like the comment about society always finding its way out with conscious, reasonable dialogue. That's what society has to do and lead our children by example. That's jumping off of what Dr. Hoops told us when it comes to the psychology of masks and no masks in the classroom. Thanks for having Dr. Pate on today. The analogy with the bulletproof vest was absolutely perfect. I loved it. Keep the good sense coming our way, says Kathy from Star. We were married on Friday the 13th. 40 years, can't be all that bad though, right? Even though my dad said we were doomed.